Doctoring Differently podcast. I'm Dr. Naomi Lawrence-Reid, your host, a pediatrician, and creator of the Doctoring Differently digital course that teaches physicians of all specialties how to find and explore flexible, lucrative careers beyond full-time clinical medicine. For more information, visit doctoringdifferently.com. Today, I'm joined by Tyler Olson, a financial planner with 24 years experience and founder of Advice Residency, an educational program designed to provide physicians and trainees with financial advice that addresses the unique challenges of the physician career path. I'm so excited about this guest and all of the guests on the podcast. You won't want to miss any of it. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And subscribe to the Doctoring Differently YouTube channel to watch all of the episodes on YouTube. And now for my conversation with Tyler Olson. So Tyler, welcome to the podcast. We're glad to have you here to talk about financial planning for physicians of all educational stages. So welcome.
Thanks. It's really, really nice to talk with you in person. Have had lots of messaging.
Sure.
And I love the things that you are doing and sharing, and so I'm glad to learn from you too.
Thank you. Yes, Tyler and I connected on the artist formerly known as Twitter on that platform, and I've seen him say really great things and very insightful things from someone who's not a physician, but clearly knows us, knows how we think about money. So I was always very impressed with your posts and your interactions with physicians, and it sounded like you are always in a place of wanting to learn and understand rather than preach at us or tell us exactly what we don't know. We sometimes know what we don't know, but we oftentimes don't. So I liked your angles. So you're a financial planner, but how did you become interested specifically in physicians' financial planning?
It came from relationships that I had in my personal life. My primary care physician from years back, he and I got to be friends, and he's actually near retirement now.
Mm-hmm.
But so his experience with medical school expenses and the work environment is very different from those that are getting out of school and training now. But thankfully, I loved learning from him about his field, just talking with him. And students would come in and do rotations, primary care rotations with his office. And so he got to see a lot of what his younger colleagues were going through, and he would share them with me. And I've been in financial planning since 2005, but it wasn't until over 10 years later that I got to start to understand the unique financial decisions that physicians have to make within a very short period of time. And as he was telling me these things, it occurred to me that there's a lot of good financial education and knowledge that's locked up on my side of the field, or in my field, but it's not, at least it had not been, that I could see, easily accessible and relatable to the people who are trying to make these really big decisions in school, training, and in their own personal financial decisions. And I was like, someone's got to do something about this. And I thought I could do this.
Yeah, it's great. Glad you did.
Or at least I could try.
You sure. All right, let's get right into it. What is the biggest mistake you see physicians making with their money?
The most broad mistake that I see from a principle standpoint would have to be making big decisions too quickly.
Okay. Like what?
Like refinancing their student debt without realizing what their options really are.
Okay.
Buying a house before they know that they're going to stick with the job and the location that they're moving to.
Okay.
Buying a car without thinking about the real needs that they have. I've even seen, and I don't even mean necessarily they bought a new car, so that was the bad decision. I don't mean it like that. Okay. I mean they even bought a used car that wasn't in really good condition because they thought, well, I just need to buy the cheapest car possible. I'm in residency. and so I'm just going to buy the cheapest car possible. That makes sense, but then they end up having like lots of car repairs and issues, and they don't have very much time to take care of that. So I know this is kind of a tangent, but just like there are some scenarios where leasing a car might make sense, but because physicians don't have a lot of time to be able to sift through the pros and cons of a decision, it's just very common for them to do something because they got to do something, and they do something, and they just haven't been able to sift through the real pros and cons. And that applies to like any area of finance, investing, real estate, the types of insurance they buy, who they decide to trust if they decide to hire a financial advisor, just making decisions too quickly.
Okay. That's, very insightful. So you already mentioned the L word of loans. As far as I know, the average medical student educational debt burden is around $200,000 on average. And that's, I think, just medical school, not maybe even considering undergraduate loans. So could you break down broad picture? Obviously, you're speaking in generalities, but what are physicians' options for loan repayment? Let's say are we starting in residency? Are we deferring until after training? Or what are those options? What should physicians be considering? Because as you know, or as you've, I'm sure, been told, we really don't get education about all of our options. It's very who you know, who can give you some good advice, a colleague or a friend. But I would say the education, as you said, is minimal for us. So loans.
If we're talking about, I can talk about federal loans in a moment, but if anyone has private loans because their medical school didn't accept federal loans, or they weren't approved for federal student loans, or if they took out additional institutional loans to be able to make up for cost of living, all of that type of debt it has to eventually be paid off. There are some provisions where maybe they could get some loan forgiveness if their work is associated with like an NIH grant or contract. Then it can be applied to student loans in general. It doesn't have to be federal loans. But for the most part, those types of loans need to be considered like slightly lower interest rate credit card debt. Credit cards obviously are 20, 25%. That's really high. And institutional loans may be 8, 10, 12%, maybe 15%. So they're still not good, and they do need to be addressed. While they're in school, they can't do anything about it. While they're in residency or fellowship, they likely can't do a lot about it. So the goal with private student loans is to put it onto a track that is manageable until they're done with their training, because they can't put it on like a 5-year payoff and pay a couple $1,000s a month when they're only pulling in $3,900 a month. So they need to figure out what the interest rate is now, what the required payment is per month for the successive years until they're done with training. And if it's manageable, then they don't have to do anything about it. If the interest rate is relatively low, and by that, like in these terms today, anything less than 7% is low as far as private debt, because interest rates have gone up. So now we're talking 8, 9, 10, 12, 15%. Those are, if you're in those ranges, then you do want to look at refinancing to a lower rate if possible, to reduce the interest expense and put it onto a long term that is manageable with your monthly budget. And there are some programs out there that are aware of the path that residents and fellows are on, like SoFi and Laurel Road are the two that come to mind. They have refinance programs where you only have to pay $100 a month for a certain number of years.
Oh, wow.
You do get charged interest, but the payment is low to help manage the budget. So that's something that's worth looking into. You have to be mindful of the terms, though, because a lot of times those deals run out after 4 years or 5 years. I have heard that some have gotten deals that are like 7 years long, so they could stretch it into different fellowship training. But you just have to know what you're accepting before you do it.
So it sounds like that might be or you're painting it for me right now as maybe an alternative or maybe even a better option to just deferring loan repayment during training or during residency. Am I hearing you correctly or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, if you're married and your spouse earns a really great income, maybe you can knock it out. But generally my advice on debt in training is to pretend like we're talking about a single person.
Sure.
You just like you got your $60,000 salary or whatever it is, and you got to just tread water.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember those days. Okay. So my next question was, why do you think doctors' relationship with money is so complicated?
I think that there are a few major factors. The doctors that I've met, they all really, really love their work and their patients. And they want to be able to take care of people. They want to be able to give them their best. The concept of making money in that environment, I see a lot of physicians, thankfully they don't do it to their own detriment for the most part, but I can feel the conflict of we need to just put patients first. We need to take care of them. And so the idea of making money almost sounds selfish, which is ridiculous when you say it out loud, because
yes,
you're
it is.
These are very specially trained people, very intelligent, hardworking, have spent years and years dedicating their life to their trade. They deserve to be paid well.
Right.
And so that's not something that should be pursued or relied upon. But that is a conflict. And internally, it seems like there's pressure from the institutions and the environment to say you gotta stand up and do what's right for the patient. And that's coming from the entities that are profiting from the process of healthcare.
That's right.
That drives me nuts.
Yes. So I appreciate you saying that.
That's one thing.
I appreciate you saying that. You are absolutely correct. That is from the very beginning. I think we go into medicine assuming that, we'll be treated fairly, paid appropriately. I think that's the quote unquote American dream for so many. And then we get out of training. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars of educational debt, and we've spent the past decade or more in institutions that have heavily strongly implied that if you are asking for money, if you're trying to negotiate, if you care at all about your salary, you must be a lesser doctor. You must care less about your patients. And you said it correctly and perfectly that those are exactly the institutions that where CEOs are making tens of millions of dollars, where institutions are having, billion-dollar quarters, and insurance companies and pharma and tech and everyone else who makes money off healthcare can't replace our labor, yet making us feel like we, of course, can't demand to be paid really fairly, equitably, or I think conducive to what our labor is worth. So I agree. So whose responsibility is it to teach doctors about money? Is it medical schools? Is it residencies? Or should, is it people like you and I who come up and just try to start yelling on Twitter about money issues or about money things? Where should residents, or really residents, but all physicians, be looking for information or credible information about money?
From an altruistic perspective, it's something that we would ideally like to have taught to us when we're young.
Right.
So that we grow up trying to understand the concept of money and its application as a tool in our life, and how money is used as a tool in the system in which we're raised so that we can advocate for ourselves. It takes years of good habit building and good examples around us for us to be able to do that naturally. So ideally, when people say where should it start? I say I've got a 5-year-old, and, we were even having a conversation about currency and how it works the other day, because I want him to be able to advocate for himself as he gets older. But that's we're talking about the here and now, what does one do? And the realistic answer is that it is every person for themselves. They have to advocate for themselves. They're playing from behind because not only do they have big decisions that may be looming, like I've got this student debt and I need to know what to do like right now. Even if they don't need to know right now, they feel like they need to because when the problem presents itself, it feels very urgent. I try to encourage people to realize that there is time to think. You don't need to act immediately. You just need to realize, hey, I need to learn something here to make this decision, and then take an hour to research and to find the information that they need to find. Now, like your question of like, well, where did they go? I mean, that's a big reason why I have established myself on Twitter consistently saying, ask me your questions. Right. You can send me a DM, reply to this. I will answer your questions. And there are other resources, people like you that answer questions too. I know there's fellow financial planners that are willing to answer people's questions. And I say all this because like we're talking about people, if we're talking about residents and fellows and medical students, we're not talking about people that can go out and just pay for boutique high-end financial planning services. They just need a little bit of help figuring out some answers to their questions. And so the free resources on social media are there. But in the end, they have to advocate for themselves because their circumstances are unique.
Yes.
And they are playing from behind because the decisions are big. But then the other issue is that they feel like they are behind in life.
Right.
They want to be able to buy a home if they want that. They want to be able, if they want to have kids, and like the issues of busyness and meeting somebody and having making those very personal decisions, all the while trying to become the best version of a doctor that they want to be. They're under a lot of time pressure.
That's right.
To make these decisions too. And so the earlier, like I tell people that are going into medical school, they ask me questions. I'm like, this is great. You're talking about this now.
Yeah.
Because if you can think about these things in advance, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ahead of time, then you'll have more time to think out the decisions before you make them. That will prevent you from acting too quickly on decisions without thinking them through.
Absolutely. So giving yourself time, thinking, if we have medical students or resident listeners now, thinking about this and not just putting it out of your mind. If I'm thinking back, I probably did more of the latter, the exact opposite of your advice. And I knew I had loans. I didn't really want to think about it. I wasn't really considering it. I knew I was going to residency. I deferred them, but I certainly did not. I didn't have many conversations. I didn't know who to talk to at all. I knew someone who did my mother's taxes, did my taxes when I was a resident, and that's all I knew. So the fact that there are voices on social media and other places now, I think you're exactly right, are a starting place, and hopefully we can move to a place, which I'm pretty vocal about, is medical education, actually educating not only about, of course, financial decisions and loans, but also malpractice and other business aspects that, of course, we don't know.
It would be really great if the medical schools were required to teach this. Like, and I know it's not as simple as just like, well, just have another course, because there's reasons that I don't fully understand. I do think that it is my opinion that there really is no excuse for medical schools to not create this space during fourth year.
You're absolutely
right. There seems to be some time during fourth year.
Yes, there is.
But they just don't have, they wouldn't benefit from it financially, so they're not going to do it.
Exactly. I'm so glad you...
And I'm getting mad now.
Join me. I stay in this place of being upset about things like this, but and I respect I really enjoy your, you're like, I didn't go to medical school, but I've seen enough to know effectively. But you're exactly right. I tweeted last year or the year before, I had 10 weeks off at the end of medical school. 10. I front-loaded my fourth year, so I did everything I needed to do. So I was done by mid-March, and I didn't graduate till the beginning of June. And so you can't tell me that the time is not there for a 1-week seminar about loan repayment options, about finance, about even my biggest qualm is malpractice. We are in no way taught about malpractice, and we can be sued the first day of residency. The very first day we can be sued, and medical school is silent about it, residencies are silent about it, and it lives in the back of our minds every time we interact with the patient, yet it is, our education is silent about it. So you are entirely correct. The time is there. It should absolutely be required by ACGME, by medical schools, the accreditation board, but you are right. These are businesses, they are corporations, and quite frankly, they benefit from our ignorance around money and business entirely.
There's another thing to note, and like making it required, as you mentioned, would be a good idea, because some people, when I've mentioned the idea of creating like a seminar or course or something during fourth year, I get some pushback where they say, well, but a lot of the students, they just won't come. They won't attend. They're not interested, or they don't realize that it's important. And I don't think that's a good generalization to make. I think it is a problem, though, because I can tell you, I schedule cost-free consultations with medical students and trainees throughout the year, several dozen at least every year. It's like 30-minute sessions, and we just scheduled out our October through December just to keep ahead of the schedule. I get a lot of people that don't show up. Like they get email reminders. It's like, and it's not to say that it's not a matter of like respect or anything. I realize that they're extremely busy, and I think that there is substantial distraction. And so making something that would be required would be phenomenal.
Make it required.
Because then they have to do it.
That's right. We respond to requirements, I'll tell you that. I wanted to get into public service loan forgiveness. In an election year, we hear a lot about loan forgiveness, I believe often as a way to, inspire voters. But from your take, can you talk a little bit about federal PSLF loans?
From a what can I rely upon standpoint, the only thing with regards to federal student loan management that can be relied upon for current borrowers is that the existence of public service loan forgiveness, the PSLF program that forgives remaining debt after 10 years of full-time work for a nonprofit organization, while also being on an income-driven repayment plan, that is something that physicians can rely upon. Okay. I've seen it happen. I've seen the loan balances get wiped out of nowhere. You don't expect it until it happens, and then you're like, wow, this is real. It is definitely real. Yeah. And for any current borrowers, you do not need to pay any attention to anyone who says, like, well, they might take PSLF away. PSLF is encoded in law. It's not to say that it can't be repealed or taken back, but it would most certainly only occur for new borrowers, not for current borrowers. Okay. So if that is something that you have in your plan, you're like, I've got $430,000 in debt, and you happen to be working in, you're in med peds and you're going to work in an academic center after training, that is an excellent program for you, and you should definitely try to take full advantage of it. The other thing that can be relied upon are that there are income-driven repayment plans that are going to remain in existence in one form or another. Those are really good for trainees because it's just based on your income. Right. You'll hear some people say, well, the newest repayment plan, SAVE, is something that might go away. And it could, because it was not encoded in law. It is an act that was carried out by the Department of Education, and that can more easily be adjusted than a law. So the SAVE plan could go away, but it would just be replaced with something else. Okay. And so as far as as far as student loan management is concerned, we just have to focus on what we can control. And so if you have a personal budget, this is what your rent is, car payment, utilities, whatever it is, your student loan payment is going to be something. The fact that you can't know exactly what it is admittedly frustrating, but it will be based on your income, and it is worth it for you to research the current repayment plan options. And now I said income-driven repayment plans as a requirement of PSLF, and that is true, but you can also just utilize the income-driven repayment plans for budget purposes while you're in training, even if you're going to be going into private practice afterward. This is just something to help to steady the waters while your income is low. And then once you're out of training, then you can make the next decision about what to do with your federal student loans. If you are going to continue working in an academic or nonprofit setting, then you really want to look at PSLF and do not refinance your loans to a private lender. But if you are going to go into private practice, then you might want to refinance if you can go get a lower interest rate. But this deserves your attention if you have federal student loans and you are a physician, because you likely have a lot of debt if you do.
Right. That is great advice.
Those are just take the time. It's worth it.
Take the time. All right. We could do full episodes on each of these topics, but in the interest of time, could you briefly touch on investing and kind of tax-saving modalities for physicians maybe out of training? We're maybe hopefully at the end of some loan forgiveness, and now we're just thinking about our future, and we want to invest. We want to mitigate taxes. What are our options?
Investing and tax efficiency go hand in hand if you do it right. Physicians that are out of training really need to prioritize both actions, and they can do so through their employer's retirement plans. The most common combination I see are 401k or a 403b, depending on if you're in a nonprofit or a for-profit company. And then I often see a secondary retirement plan option known as a 457b, which is also known as a deferred compensation plan. You need to absolutely take full advantage of the 401k or 403b. And by doing that, you are both investing and trying to mitigate some current taxation. You're likely in, at the very lowest, the 24% federal tax bracket, and you're possibly up in the 30s, maybe as high as the 37% bracket if you're in like a surgical specialty that pays a lot. And if you're in a state that charges state income tax, that's on top of that. The first $150,000 of your income is taxed Social Security income and Medicare tax. So there's a lot of taxes. If you look at a cash flow chart of where someone's income goes, and a physician, their gross income is like a bar chart that goes like this, almost half of it is always taxes, and it just goes whoop, it disappears. And if there's an opportunity to reduce that with investing, you should do it. With a 401k or 403b, if you put in the full $23,000 as an attending physician, if you had not done that and taken it as a paycheck, you would only have seen like $14,000, maybe $16,000 of that at most, because taxes would have been withdrawn from that $23,000.
Okay.
But by making the pre-tax contribution to the 401k or the 403b, the full $23,000 goes to work into the plan, and it is invested. You have to make investment choices. Often there is something called a target date fund, which is an automated fund that's based on your hypothetical retirement age, and it's a mix of stock investments and bond investments. Stocks means that you are an owner of a company. Bonds means that you have lent money to a company. Both can create profit for you. Stocks are more profitable generally, but they take on more risk. Bonds are less profitable, and you are also taking on less risk. So as you get older, you will convert more and more of your investment portfolio, as we call it, to bonds and less stock. But when you're young, you want to do a lot of stock and very little, if any, bonds.
What do you consider young? Just, asking for myself. What is young in your estimation of as a financial planner?
Young in terms of investment behavior, I would say anyone under 55.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Did I save
under
myself
50.
there?
Yes, you sure did. You sure did.
Right,
okay,
good.
I'm 40. So so
Yeah.
from a risk
Me too.
perspective, all right, here we go. Hopefully 83. From a risk perspective, under 55, we can be more aggressive in what you're saying, maybe be more stocks forward. And then after that, more bond. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, that's my personal philosophy. It's important to note, anybody listening, is that you know that I'm not giving investment advice
Sure.
to anyone who's listening.
Yep.
Because another thing that has to be evaluated is your own disposition toward risk.
Sure.
Some people they cannot get beyond feeling scared to death
Yes.
that they're going to lose their money in the stock market.
Yes.
And you need to be able to sleep at night too.
Right.
It's important that people know, though, that when they take on that mantle of, I'm too scared to invest, I'm just going to keep my money in the bank, they need to realize that the cost of living goes up every year. And so by doing that, they are losing money guaranteed every year. So if you are afraid of losing money,
Right.
then you should not keep all your money in the bank either. And so that begs the question, well, where can I put my money where I'm not scared or I don't have some fear? And the answer is there is no place like that, because that is not how money works. Money is a tool within a fluid system that is huge, and we have to be able to take the time to evaluate the pros and cons of where we put our money. Cash has its place for like short-term purchases that are coming up. You don't invest money that you're going to need in 24 months for a down payment on your house. But you also don't leave money in cash that you're going to need in retirement 35 years from now.
Okay.
So you have to realize that the time between now and when we need the money will help to dictate if we should invest and how aggressively we should do so. But as an attending physician, you have to invest. That's my personal opinion. You have, the way that you go about it has to be according to you, but you cannot sit on your hands. If you don't invest, not only are you not allowing your money with the potential to grow, but you are also missing out on tax-saving opportunities, and that big chunk of tax liability is just going to come. It's just going to take the full board of money from you instead of sidestepping at least some of it.
Sure. Physicians, we are inherently, as you mentioned, risk averse. I'll say that. We truly are by nature. And we are also very skeptical, specifically of financial planners, financial advisors. I think there's a bimodal curve of physicians who think they can do it all themselves, and others who want to put their heads in the sand and don't want to think about it or do anything. So what should a physician look for as we wrap up? What should a physician be looking for in a financial planner? And what are the services that you and your firm offer to physicians?
There are thankfully a growing number of financial planners that do great work. They're transparent about the services that they offer. They're transparent about the costs. And they're also transparent about the incentives that they have, as far as if they could potentially earn money through their work process that is not directly connected to the client's decisions. But that's what you want to look for. If you're going to interview some financial planners, you want to find out, are they functioning as a fiduciary in a fiduciary capacity the entire time that they're working with you? There are some firms where an advisor can be a fiduciary in some transactions, and then they are not in other transactions.
Okay.
So you want to find that out. One way to be able to confirm that is working with someone who is a certified financial planner. That is a designation that if one achieves that, then in their work, even if they were to work for a firm like that, their personal work for you is under the fiduciary standard 100% of the time. And I know a lot of great CFPs. Okay. You also want to make sure that they're being upfront with you about transparency of what they're offering you, what you will get, how often, so that your expectations can be managed properly. And what is it going to cost for you to do that? Sometimes it is a flat fee. Like our firm, we charge a flat fee to create a comprehensive plan for attending physicians. Okay. We're also about to release a flat fee arrangement for trainees for single sessions so that they can get just isolated advice.
Great.
and then they carry on and implement their decisions. In both cases, with the in-training strategy session and with the comprehensive plan, the idea is to work together on the plan. We charge a flat fee, and then we help them to implement it. And then the idea is that they are taking ownership of their plan. So if you look to hire a financial planner, you want to find someone that will meet you where you are in terms of what degree of involvement you want. If you want to be totally hands-off, then you need to find someone that is going to do everything for you while still informing you of all the decisions that are being made and why. If you want to be collaborative, then you want to make sure that you can get the sense that this person's not just going to go create a plan and come back to me and say, okay, here's your plan, I'll see you later. You want them to be like, okay, now we're going to talk about investing together. Now we're going to talk about estate planning together. Now we're going to talk about cash flow management. And if you want to be involved in the decisions, then that's the sort of relationship that you want to try to find. So understanding services, understanding what the costs are, and understanding that it's like the personality and environment that suits your disposition towards your own financial decisions. Those are really big keys. And so, just like I said at the outset, not acting quickly. You want to take your time to evaluate who you're going to trust, because it's a really big decision. If you're going to trust a planner or advisor to get in your mind and heart about money decisions, you really want to take your time and interview a few people at least.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your advice and your words today. I appreciate your knowledge and insights around money and loans for physicians. I appreciate you speaking loudly on Twitter and I think reaching residents at stages and medical students at stages that, at least in my generation, no one was really talking to us about money. So keep it up and keep doing great work. Thank you so much.
I'll do my best. Thanks for inviting me.